distinction that we've got two departments standing in front of you this morning. That Ben and his wife Erin and their family are a department. I'm a department, I guess. But there's a lot of overlap between our ministries. We are all working with music ministry in Germany. We're tremendously excited to share a little bit with you about how all of that looks. Our ministries overlap a great deal in working with an organization called Eurobrass. Eurobrass is a German nonprofit organization that basically works using brass music to help draw people closer to Jesus. And Ben and I have both been involved in a lot of short-term missions endeavors with Eurobrass, both going on tours and staffing workshops that they've done. And so for both of us, that organization has kind of been our portal into ministry in Germany. And what we've realized through our work there and through talking with believers in Germany is that there's this huge need for revival in the German church and among German people. In a lot of ways, Germany is kind of a post-Christian country. The gospel has been there for centuries. They have this huge tradition in the church. It's the cradle of the Reformation. They have great church music tradition with Bach. It's just enormous. But modern culture there is very secularly oriented. And so for a lot of people, there's not a great sense that a relationship with Jesus is something that is important in people's everyday lives. And so you end up with a situation where in a lot of German churches, they're functioning almost more as a social and cultural institution than as a sacred institution. So at the same time, in those same churches, there is a great appreciation for classical music, and especially brass music. And that's kind of where we come in. Because what Eurobrass does is we go into these churches and we say, we value this music that you love so much, and we value performing that well. And that kind of helps us establish credibility with those people, and that gives us space to share Jesus with them and hopefully to build relationships that lead to discipleship with folks. So that's kind of the flyover view of what we do. We'd like for you to see a little bit of Eurobrass in action. I mentioned Bach just a moment ago and the great importance of his music in the German church tradition. Because of that, we always try to play a little bit of Bach when we go anywhere. So we've got a little video for you. This is the 2015 Eurobrass Ensemble playing Bach's Contrapunctus 9.
So I'll just talk a little bit about the tour. We play classical music on the tour, and we sort of break down the barriers of we're professional musicians and you're the rank public audience, if you will, and we bring a friendliness about what we do, and audiences that come to our concerts can tell that we love playing together, and that we're genuinely connecting with them. And so yeah, one of the things people say about our concerts is that the concert was great until you started doing that Jesus stuff, which helps us realize that the offense of the gospel is present, and I don't think they're offended by our playing, hopefully. But then there are the others that just whisper, "Thank you for talking about Jesus in the way that you did." So it's a different approach. It's a culturally fitting approach for Germany, and so yeah, we play concerts in churches, and we stay with host families. A lot of the churches we play in, the pastors aren't even believers, and there are other places where we know that the Spirit of the Lord is present, and so our host families, some of the times they're believers, and we have great fellowship through the language barrier, and sometimes we realize they're probably not believers either, and so it's just a really neat way to bring the gospel in a different way. A little bit about your brass workshops.
Yeah, this is kind of the other piece of the puzzle, I guess, of what Eurobrass does. The tour is probably the most visible aspect of our ministry. But Eurobrass hosts a workshop every 3 years. We also staff other brass workshops, rehearsal weekends, all sorts of things for various church brass groups. And so what we're doing is going in and sitting down with these folks, and we always want to help people out musically. And usually that's the thing that they're coming for is, we want to learn to play better. Can you help us with that? But the other thing that we want to do is cultivate an understanding that, if you're here in this church brass choir doing church music, that there's a spiritual aspect to what they're doing as well. They're playing all of these wonderful traditional German chorales with these amazing texts. And so we try to talk about that and to really cultivate this sense that everything that they're doing can and should point to Jesus. Yeah. And that's work that's very dear to me personally, just because the story of my faith, to some extent, has been spiritual growth and discipleship through participation in church music ministry. Yeah. So if that's something that I can help other people cultivate, that's really exciting. Yeah. And so our hope through doing that is that, these German musicians will come to these things and they'll catch a spark of, hey, this is all about Jesus, and take that spark back into their churches. Yeah. And be a force for revival in those churches. And so we're just really, really excited about the opportunity that presents. So that's kind of kind of what Eurobrass does and is about, and that's where most of my work will be centered. Ben and Aaron also have a couple of other ventures that kind of float around that, and so I'm going to let him tell you a little bit about those.
I'll just give you a quick survey of the other things that we're doing that are different than Kathryn. I'm a composer and arranger, so part of what I'll do is be sitting in my room composing music, and in sharing that music with other people, I tell the story of where the music comes from, and that most of that has something to do with being inspired by scripture or people, and so that gives another way of telling, of using music that doesn't have words to communicate the gospel through the telling of stories. And another part of what my family will do is I've gotten involved with a ministry in Ukraine. Started out as an orchestra and handbells music camp, and then we've gotten involved with special needs ministry there as well. So now we support the orchestra and the handbell choir, and they do things to fundraise and raise support for the special needs ministry there. And so we're giving them a chance to do ministry themselves and have something beyond just doing music and getting to know the Lord. Last thing for us is we have a daughter with Charge syndrome, our youngest daughter who's 11 years old, and that inevitably leads us to connecting with other families with special needs. We've got a great special needs ministry in our church, which is where my wife has worked for 6 years, working there, and so that's an undefined, but that is always a part of what we do. And even just in people seeing how our family operates with Emily and her deal. So that's kind of a quick overview of all the stuff we're doing. It's great to be involved with ACT where we're really affirmed in our not usual, not normal kind of ministry.
Yeah.
10-second clip. I booked a place to stay on Airbnb. While I was here, it turns out my hosts are 20-year Wycliffe missionaries.
Wow.
I think I'm getting close to convincing them that I'm a real missionary, but we're still working on it. But it's a really neat thing to get to know them and to.
We didn't talk about Aaron very much, but Ben and Aaron do handbell duets and.
Oh yes, I didn't even say that. Yes, yeah. So we do handbell duets, and we may start a Syrian refugee handbell choir or something. Who knows what? There's all kinds of stuff going on in Germany right now. So who knows? So, yeah.